gotta put my ears in.
There you go.
I do have my microphone this time.
Yes, you do. You started right off with it. Nice job.
Can't.
Ooh, a little feedback there.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. Huh. That was interesting.
I didn't hear it.
Evidently not.
What did it sound like, Mark?
It sounded like feedback. It sounded like zzz.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Good job.
Hey, I try.
I assume I didn't hear it, so maybe
Yep.
that was a bad representation.
Well, when you hear it, you'll be able to hear it.
That's right.
Yeah.
Well said.
When you listen.
When you listen, you'll be able to hear it.
Yeah.
I'm listening now, and I don't hear it.
There you go. Well, it's not there. I would know.
Yes, you would. You would. All right. I think I'm.
You all adjusted? Adjusted, Justin.
Justin needs to adjust
Yeah.
just in time.
Yeah. Welcome to How I See It with me, Mark Pratt, and
Justin Sternberg. This is a podcast that works to counter cultural polarization through thoughtful conversations.
I was disappointed we didn't catch a little more of what we recorded after the session last time. I think we had some of our you're adjusting me now. I thought I was supposed to be kind of at an angle thing.
Yeah, it was just
It's my beard is shorter, Justin, so it makes the microphone look like it's in the wrong spot.
if it's angled but past your mouth, it's not good. It needs to be angled towards. Yeah.
Yeah. I hear you.
All right, what were we talking about that we wish we were recording?
Yeah, I wish we were.
reproduced.
I think the post recording conversation was in some ways just as good as the actual podcast.
What was it about?
Well, when we were talking about colleges versus trades, and like you say, I didn't want to come across as far as being dogmatic in either direction, but yeah, I think I just enjoyed the discussion afterwards and had more opportunity to think about it a little bit.
Yeah.
So
because I think it was just we were talking a little more personal about, right?
Yeah,
About
that's
my
what it was.
kids
As far as your experience a little more and
and yours,
and just having the ability to plan for our kids for the future, and it was just it was a good conversation as far as being able to think about how we plan.
Yeah.
For our kids' future, that kind of thing, recognizing, it's going to be an expense, but yet what's the hurry in some ways? And, is there a hurry? And it was just some neat life experience stuff. So appreciate you sharing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you all missed out. So.
But like you say, that's not to say we can't revisit the topic in a way that,
Yeah, that would be good. It'd be cool to potentially get someone who's kind of finance oriented to talk about practical ways to do that, or you know,
and
but
just ways to use
even Chris,
even use your retirement accounts, like IRAs and stuff like that, Roth IRAs, those you can use for education, if you want to, that kind of thing. So just it was good to be able to think about ways to make college less expensive too. For other people, for our children and that kind of thing, and recognizing that hard work does pay off, and scholarships and what have you there. That was something we didn't necessarily address, but I guess we're addressing it now a little bit. But either way,
we're teasing it anyway.
Yeah. So as you think about, our culture and what has become, I was thinking of course, about the education, and I tend to think about, what are, I'll say, universities in some ways, our educational system, higher educational system tends to promote. If you were to just kind of put that in if you were to stereotype, the process of higher education, what would what comes to mind for you? And I'm asking you because, like you say, I give you credit for being far more.
Yeah, I'm just trying to figure out what the question means.
I'm just thinking.
Can you rephrase it?
Yeah, when you think about higher education, okay, what terminologies come to mind when you think about that? As far as, I mean, do you think about education? Do you think about sports? Do you think about, in other words, a lot of people have college teams they support, or they,
a lot of things come to mind, honestly.
Okay.
Because
give me the top 5.
Okay.
If there's a lot of things.
Elitism.
Oh, okay.
That came to my mind.
Okay.
Party schools.
Okay.
That came to mind.
Sure.
I don't know if I have a single word for this, but basically like think tank.
Okay.
Kind of
sure.
like a lot of good
brainstorming,
a lot of good thoughts, a lot of good research,
Sure. Yeah.
Because there's negative and positive things.
Agreed.
That my mind kind of comes to.
And maybe stereotype was the wrong word for me to use, but just kind of, what you think of in general.
And I think kind of a little bit of the Chesterton fence thing, where there's a lot of structure that feels unnecessary, but also it's been that way for so long, and like so long to the point where, founding fathers type, close to that far back, the way things are. So then it's like, I don't know, just a lot of rigidity and structure around the whole application process, and how you get in, what you have to do,
sure.
and
the process.
And I think we talked a little bit about how it in other conversations, not just the one about college, but education, about how education doesn't always look like SATs and getting good SAT scores. I don't know.
Yeah. I think about it in some of the context of, I think, I'm thinking about it as far as, there's a lot of quotes that are coming to mind, but I can't pull them up as far as, but that ability to say, whoever controls the education kind of controls the future type thing. Because, in that dynamic, you take a kid and you expose them to a certain level of anything, that's going to affect the way they think. And I think, higher education tends to continue to promote that. And, I'm just thinking about it from different cultural things. I think about it even from, when we were seeing Black Lives Matter, how many individuals happen to be kind of young white kids, in that process. And I think, that a lot of that comes from what I would call a higher educational perspective, to be able to recognize, okay, how are people being misused or not, that kind of thing is what comes to mind from that aspect as I look back and I, think about what was going on and who was primarily involved. That's one of those things that come to mind for me. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think so. Yeah. I guess that kind of ties into a thought I had too, is kind of left-wing liberal kind of ideology. I think a lot of times is, very much that's the education, higher ed side of things.
I hear you.
And as we've talked about before, well, I don't necessarily think that's bad. I don't necessarily think we've talked about this before, but like some ideologies and things, I think left wing or right wing, I feel are loving and compassionate or whatever.
Sure. Yeah. That's what that's what I was thinking, as far as not wanting anyone to, not have the same opportunities as other people. That kind of thing. I think, that aspect of, equality, if you will, that there, should be an equality that across the board, male, female, race, whole nine things, whole 9 yards. Everything should be equal. Mm-hmm. And I like that word you use as far as ideology, because I think it is an ideology to the point that, everything can be equal, or, it's not equal, and it's not equal because of a certain reason, when that may not necessarily be the case, and we can look at things from different perspectives that, maybe more elitist, as you use the word, or it may be more victimized, depending on which end of the spectrum you follow there. But as I was thinking about that further, it's like the aspect of cancel, easy for me to say, not cancer culture. Although that tends to,
that's its own.
That seems like it's in its own increase, but like you say, cancel culture from that aspect. What comes to mind for you when I say that word from a...
Yeah. Well, what's funny is what comes to mind to me isn't necessarily college, but
I understand. But it was the best I could do to make the transition.
I know. It was good. Nice try. Yeah, I'm just saying. Yeah, again, for me, that's. So yeah, cancel.
Yeah, now you're gonna have a tough time saying it. That's okay too.
Cancel culture. I feel like the kind of the wording is pretty new, but the idea of it is pretty old. In the sense that one of the weapons that we can use in culture is to say that side is bad, this side is good. You know what I mean? And paint the picture of that side being so bad that you try and get as many people to run over to your side as possible. You know what I mean? And when I think of that, I think of politics in particular, and the ads for politicians and how they're so yeesh,
I hear you. Yeah.
And that precedes kind of this whole idea of cancel culture. I think I think that's been going a lot longer than quote unquote cancel culture. But yeah, one of the unique new things. I mean, nothing's new under the sun, right? But kind of this new round of cancel culture is about, we dug up a skeleton, and therefore we know you're human with skeletons, and therefore you're not fit for whatever the thing is you're doing, or, you know what I mean? And,
no, I don't know what you mean, but I'm with you.
I mean, it's this idea that we found something out about you.
Oh, okay. When you're saying a skeleton, I gotcha.
Yeah. We found something out about you in your past that disqualifies you from your current situation.
Okay.
And there's many situations that, I'm on board with the cancel.
Okay.
Right?
I see what you're saying.
Epstein is a good example.
Okay. Like a Supreme Court nomination, depending on when something happened, or to, It
depends, yeah.
That's what I'm saying.
So for me... So this is the crux of the conversation,
right?
Is that it depends, right?
Yeah.
And I think it's kind of this flavor of cancel culture is less it depends and just nope. If that's a thing, then you're out.
Sure. In other words, it doesn't necessarily factor in a normalized human condition.
Right. And not only that, but the ability to change.
Sure.
And did true change happen? And, your preamble this time is before we started recording, you were asking about boycotting versus cancel.
Sure.
You mentioned that word.
Yeah.
And I
I led you right down the wrong trail, didn't I?
I'm still trying to get back to the good one you started on before we were recording, but where my brain was whirring and then it just shut down. It was like a wrench in the system.
Sorry about that.
That's all right. That's more on my own tiredness than on your. Anyway, the boycotting, I kind of think, like, again, that's been that term to me, and the usage of it has been around longer than cancel culture. And when I think of boycotting, I think right wing. When I think of cancel culture, I think left wing. I think liberal. I think, and I think boycott, conservative, whatever. And I feel like they're just kind of the same ideas. Ish, maybe not. Actually, let's break that down. I don't think they're necessarily the same idea, though they could end up being that way in someone's mind. Yeah. But like the idea, again, this is how I see it, but how I see boycotting is this idea of this company stands for something we don't agree with, therefore we need to stop supporting them. So that's a pretty base definition, and I think most would agree with that. However, I think some people who jump on the boycotting bandwagon are more in a cancel culture mindset.
Sure.
Of that's right, that, shut them off,
Yeah. And I think at times, even I think there's a realistic aspect to even the kind of, there's a phrase, voting with your dollar.
Yep.
That aspect of, where we do put our resources or what we do fund makes a difference.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that has to be a part of cancel culture, but at the same time when I'm aware of my individual decisions and, I would even bring it back to maybe, where my investments go or who I, not necessarily, not that the stock market's all bad or anything, that kind of thing, but being mindful of where my resources are going and what I'm supporting with that.
Yeah.
I think that is I guess for me, it's a more palatable version of, it may be a dynamic of the cancel culture, in that process but I think it's healthier than just you're this, so therefore, but I think
I agree, but I also
go ahead.
You and I both lean definitely conservative, even if I lean.
Sure.
I try and lean away from that leaning. I'm still conservative.
I hear you.
And so are you.
Well, that's why I ask you, because you're less conservative leaning.
That's right.
Or more open-minded in some ways.
Well, I don't think that's true. I think that that's why we enjoy these conversations.
More aware.
Because, okay, gotcha. I got you. Yeah, maybe more in tune with culture.
Yeah, I give you credit for being more culturally aware.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Although, you definitely get your own share of awareness through counseling and through, some of the paradigms you... Yeah. But we make a good team is what I'm trying to say, Mark. You're okay.
Nice job.
I won't cancel you today, Mark. Or boycott you.
Yeah, and that's, I guess in some ways, that's the reality of what we do here. If you don't like what we do, you don't have to.
You can cancel.
You can cancel.
Please don't. We need your donor dollars. Just kidding.
And at the same time, that's a choice. And if you want to take, and I think that's part of the difference, if you want to take other people with you because of something we said, you get that option. Yeah. Don't listen to those guys anymore.
Okay.
They're too whatever, conservative, too liberal. I doubt we'll get called that. I really do. But at the same time, that is a perspective dynamic. Mm-hmm. And I was just thinking about it, in that process of a healthy way, to deal with that cancel.
Yeah.
There you go. Culture. Cancel.
So again, there is, there's particular movements that kind of come to mind.
Yeah.
One is the Me Too movement.
Okay. Sure.
I kept wanting to say she said.
Okay.
And I was like, that's not not it. Me Too movement. Which, if you're not familiar, I'll explain to you as you crawl out from under your rock. But basically, it's this idea that women started coming out saying, I was, sexually abused or sexually even, I don't know.
Sure.
What are the terms that aren't quite abused, but harassed, the kind of harassment or someone in influence used, my sexuality against me in some form or another, whether it was to prevent me from getting, and through that whole process, I personally was very thankful for that, because I think there is a lot of that happening, or was happening. I'm sure still happening. I I don't think that's ever going to go away. But there's dynamics too, and we've talked about masculinity, toxic masculinity. We've talked about gender. We've talked about a lot of these things. And we've talked about a little bit about the patriarchy and the idea behind that. And a lot of those things aren't going away, maybe ever.
Sure.
And so, and men, and by men I mean mankind, men and women, but we're evil at our heart, and that's something we believe theologically as believers, is that by nature our bent is towards evil, and more accurately towards our own flesh. So, you know, feeding my own desires and my own, and me above all others, right? And so as a result, there's going to be situations where men, specifically the gender men, will use the fact that they're a man and they have particular influence in their situation to get what they want, which is sex, which is influence, which is affection from women, whatever. What were you going to say?
Power.
Yep. And as a result, women will be abused through that one way or another, I think. And so I guess all that to say, I'm thankful to have some light shed, some accountability brought to bear, in the sense that, you know, there was a minute there where I think every man in show business especially was afraid of, like, well, crap, are they going to talk about this thing? Well, maybe they should. You know, it was kind of my mindset, like. But at the same time, obviously, there's a fine line between that and grace and someone, you know, changing and having done the wrong things in their past. Heck, I've done lots of wrong things in my past that we talk about it at Celebrate Recovery, and talk about, you know, it's a big part of what we do at CR is talk about the junk in our drawer from the, you know, our past skeletons. Situations, our skeletons. Yep. In order to provide some light for those still dealing with that thing in a path forward, and also to try and keep us out of that, right? Away from those things. So cancel culture is just this idea that, well, you did a bad thing once, and therefore you're that person, and that person can't be allowed to be doing the thing that that person's doing, which, you know, whether it's politics or showbiz or whatever. And again, in some cases, I think that's true. You are that person, and you shouldn't be allowed to be doing what you're doing, because since that thing was found, there's nothing in their life that you can point to that says, you're not someone different, right?
Yeah.
And I can definitely think of different individuals that have been kind of accused in that whole thing, that I'm like, yeah, probably a good thing they're canceled. You know, I can't see any reason, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I do. And I'm not, and I appreciate the opportunity to talk about it, because in some ways I'm not always sure that in the cancel culture dynamic, it's as cut and dry as what you're describing. You know, that somebody did something wrong, therefore, and I think at times it can just be somebody said something, you know, that was conservative, or somebody said something that was liberal. And therefore now we, you know, and at times I'm not even always sure that people have a full understanding of the context.
I guess, yeah, I agree.
Okay.
I guess I think from my perspective, I was coming at it from the historical part of how we got here.
Okay.
And I feel like, okay, so now that thing happened.
Yep.
You know,
Me Too movement.
Me Too movement.
I got you. Yep.
Maybe a listener has ideas of other things preceded that kind of even set the stage for Me Too. But for me, that seemed like a watershed moment in terms of cancel culture. Okay. And again, I look at that thing and I think mostly good outcome. Like mostly I'm thankful for the cancels that happened in that culture. Right. So, but I think it set a precedence for, hey, this thing works. Right. Yeah. Like, and then, you know, obviously there's been concerns, which I don't feel too bad about this, but like, well, I'm a man, I'm an actor, and maybe I did something in my past, but I'm not like that anymore, and am I going to lose my livelihood?
Sure.
You know, and that part of me just wants to go boo-hoo, but then there's a part of me that goes, yeah, I understand. Like, we want grace, we need grace, you know, and maybe that person is legitimately trying to be a different person, you know, and I support that in every way, you know, and maybe to an extreme compared to most people. And that's as a result of hearing 800 testimonies, right, over the last 14 years of doing Celebrate Recovery and going, holy crap, that person can change, you know, and yeah, anyway. So yeah, I agree with you. It's gotten to, I think, in some ways, an extreme place where you can point at one single sentence and say, that's who that person is, therefore cancel.
I gotcha.
Right?
Yeah.
To bring it back around to it.
And when would you say I'm honestly think about it from the aspect of, you know, Me Too movement, that kind of thing. What era would you put that in as far as that goes?
What do you mean by era?
In other words, 90s,
Oh,
80s?
Me Too? No,
yeah.
2010s.
Okay. Yeah, I guess I'm just thinking about it even as you think of different, you know, and I do think about it even from the university standpoint of I think of even the Olympics. You know, when I'm thinking about these doctors, Nassar.
Yeah.
I was thinking about the coach from Penn State. You know, who had, you know, because those things, and there again, I think, you know, some of that might have preceded that.
Yeah.
Me Too. As you brought up the point, I was just thinking about I can't think of the coach from, but yeah.
So, Tarana Burke, never heard that name.
Okay.
Have you?
No.
Is an American activist and business executive. In 2006, she founded the Me Too movement, which sought to assist survivors of sexual violence, especially women of color. So I guess 2006 would have been the kind of starting point.
Sure.
I never heard any of that, but yeah, so
yeah,
it makes sense that it's kind of ramped up. Yeah.
Yeah. But I guess maybe I'm older than I think I am, but it seems like some of those other dynamics, even, you know.
Yeah, like the Olympic. I think that was all.
Was that all about the same time?
I mean, let me look at Nassar Olympics.
And was it Sandusky was the coach from Penn State? There again, those are the things that are kind of coming to mind as we, you know, have this topic. And by all means, I think there's something to be said for, you know, people of power, you know, taking advantage of people, you know, who don't have the same power or using their power in such a way that is, you know, manipulative or, you know, what would you find there?
Accusations from the 90s to 2018, but June 17, 2015 is when, according to court filings and interviews, Maggie Nichols and her coach Sarah Jancy reported Nassar to USA Gymnastics officials on June 17, 2015.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that was 2015.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
And Sandusky.
Yeah, like I say, I might be really pulling back. It was under Paterno. I know Joe Paterno was head coach, and I thought, yeah, can remember who was underneath him. Might not even show up. I might have a wrong person.
He was arrested at his residence on December 7, 2011.
Okay. So yeah.
What was the other one?
No, was that Sandusky?
Yeah.
Okay. No, that was that's the same.
So 2006 kind of started ramping this up.
Yeah.
Which Sandusky, I mean, that was boys.
Yep.
So I don't know if it fell into Me Too, but yeah, definitely the idea of
I do think
the
there
jig
again,
is up.
Yeah. And someone in power who, you know, basically assaulted a number of individuals, you know, and Me Too, it kind of comes to mind. And I, you know, fully agree that, you know, a lot of that circumstance, it's not just about other people jumping on the bandwagon.
Right.
I believe, you know, that had been going on for a long time.
Yep.
And go ahead.
Sorry.
But as people, I think there is and I would be the first to admit, and I think I've even had, you know, these conversations with, you know, like Lizzie, it's to the point of recognizing that it almost went to a point of feminism at times, because it's like, even now, it's like sometimes when I open the door for somebody, it's not that I don't think you can open the door for yourself, that kind of thing. But I think it's changed an awareness that we have. That's like, am I offending you by doing so? You know what I mean? It's if I may, your stick analogy.
Yeah.
It's gone from
it's working.
It's gone from, one part to another as far as, what was just a chivalrous, if I may say so, dynamic has become something that is, rude.
Yeah. I think one of the aspects of culture we can count on, like the ticking of a clock, is the pendulum swinging, right?
Oh, sure.
You think of a grandfather clock and how the pendulum swings back and forth, and like that's absolutely part of how culture works. And I definitely see this whole cancel culture, Me Too, all of that, the pendulum swinging back from the direction it was.
Okay.
And probably, I think, reaching a point where it's going to start swinging back, or is already. Okay. That's my perspective on it. Because there's a reason it got so bad and this became such a big thing. It's because the pendulum had been on that other end for so long that there was no longer even that much effort to be secret about these things.
Sure.
And that could only last so long. And all of a sudden, it's like, well, you saw that? Yeah, that's a real thing. And then, well, let's deal with it. And then we did. And it's like, well, they dealt with it. Why can't, and it's like, boom, 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 the dominoes started falling.
Gotcha.
And now they're, it's like the dominoes are just knocking down everywhere. And it's like even good dominoes, like whatever. And I feel like, again, my perspective, and we can, let's listen back in 20 years and see, whatever. But I feel like we're reaching a point where it's going to start swinging back because now, chaos, dominoes everywhere, and we don't even know anymore which dominoes are good or which ones are bad, and so now it's time to start rebuilding that domino train, right? Like, and I think there'll be kind of a shift into like, all right,
sure,
and I feel like that's already happening. I think there's so many different things that have kind of latched onto this cancel culture idea that it's gotten to the point where it's like, all right, we're doing that again. Let's just wait it out and see how legit this really is.
Okay.
I feel like that's where we're at already.
In other words, there's a waiting process that wasn't necessarily let's see where the facts go or what bubbles to the surface before we start to jump to a conclusion. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, now I think boy cried wolf enough times by this point that the pendulum's starting to swing back. That's my perspective on it, to where it's like, well, let's just see how it works out in court, and let's see,
Yeah.
And so I also want to say the fact that a few innocents probably got hit in this whole Me Too thing, that's a bummer. The fact that so many got caught, right, is, I don't want to even say that's worth it. That's terrible. That's not what I mean. But I'm just really thankful that the pendulum swung this way because
it needed to swing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And as everybody should, I have a particular distaste for sexual abuse. And, I have, reasons because of, my family and stuff like that I just, to me, that's a very angering thing when I hear about that, So I'm really thankful to hear people got what they had, you know what I mean? And if someone got canceled because they did that in the past, and maybe they're changed now, I don't feel too bad about it, partly because I don't know that person, and I don't, like, I think it might be different if I was doing accountability with them, and I'm like, well, you don't understand, this person's really actually working to be a different that's a whole different thing. But
it's like any law or anything that's personal. Once it affects me, and I'm a different person, or it affects me and I can't deny this anymore. Yeah. Then it takes on a personal dynamic. And if I may, that pendulum swing, I like the pendulum swing. What would you say is underneath that? In other words, what creates I know you mentioned the lady in 2006. Do you think that's really what it comes down to? Is one person create?
No, I don't.
Therefore, I would be curious. What do you see is the underlying factor? And granted, the mind can go to the spiritual realm and that kind of thing, and yet I'm still thinking about it. Is there very much a cultural dynamic that comes into play that tends to regulate which direction that pendulum shifts as you see it?
Yeah, I mean, I don't even think it's that deep or complicated. I just think it's the nature of the pendulum to where, like I was saying, where it's swinging so far this way, the momentum can no longer take it that way. It has to do what gravity does and swing back. And that's why I was trying to talk about the scenario where we're no longer even doing this in secret. We're so confident of no one's going to call me out on this. I have so much power. I can just
elitist.
Yeah, sure. I think it's more
I'm above the process.
I think it's the process is for people like us.
I gotcha.
So I can do this because I'm in the specific vein of who this works for.
Sure.
Know?
Okay.
And again, I think the pendulum swings so far so long that it eventually it just cannot be supported that way anymore. It's like now you're just raping people in your office in front of your whole office.
Sure.
And there's photographic evidence and there's 18 witnesses and what I mean? And then not only are you doing that, like I said, it comes out, it's publicized, people start finding out, and then you're like, that just happened in my office. Maybe I should talk about it, right? And so you get what I'm saying about the natural pendulum of like, you reach a point where it cannot go any further and start swinging back the other direction.
Sure.
So I don't think it's, my perspective is I don't think there's, you can point to that lady or you can point to specific events, but I always feel like that's not the trigger. That's the thing that points to the pendulum swinging back.
I hear you.
The natural course correction that happens culturally. And I believe, again, spiritually, that this is, God's way of handling things, what I mean? And which, would probably, if we go that direction, we could never come back. But,
I hear you. No doubt.
There's a lot to be said about that. But
yeah,
I don't think it's that complex. I don't think there's
I hear where you're coming from.
Underground things that are manipulating. I think it's the natural course.
Yeah.
But I do think people take credit for those swings. Or like,
I got you.
We'll give credit, right?
Sure.
Like, look at that person. They changed the course of whatever. It's like, yes, they were part of that pendulum swinging back.
Sure.
And
so even people like Martin Luther King or somebody like that, you would say that pendulum, I'm not undermining him, but you would say it just got to a point where people said, no, this isn't right. And he happened to be a spokesperson for that pendulum swing.
Yeah, I never thought about that, but I think you could totally go that, right? Like, I think you could make a case for the way the church had gone and like how extreme it had reached a point where, okay, something's going to start tipping.
Sure.
You know what I mean?
Sure.
So, yeah.
I hear you. Yeah.
Yes.
I gotcha.
Yeah. And I would argue too, like, just think about, you think about Cirque du Soleil, right? You ever heard of that? It's like these crazy circus performers.
Yeah, it's like a version of Escapades or something like that. Not that.
Yeah, but not on ice. But gymnastics.
Yeah.
But what they do is, I mean, world define. Like, it's insane. Like the level, it's way beyond Escapades in my opinion.
Yeah,
as far
no,
as
I agree. I just
what they're pulling off and
it's a show.
Like, it's otherworldly what they're able to do. Like,
I gotcha.
But so much of what they're doing depends on momentum.
Okay.
Right?
Sure.
So the feats that they're accomplishing seem physics defying, but it's not. It's physics.
Sure.
Right? It's the natural swing of motion can cause that much dynamic thing. Or enough people jump on a trampoline at the same time creates this. And that person's 200 feet in the air. I mean, it's ridiculous, exactly. But it's like, it doesn't seem like that's possible for those 4 people to go boink like that and this person to be, you know what I'm saying?
Catapulted that far in the
right.
air.
And so you look at that person, you think that person is not human, right? Like they have something that none of us do, which is still true. I'm not taking away from their abilities. They are ridiculous in their athleticism, and they're doing things that do get them killed.
Sure.
Right? Like it's intense things they're doing. Like But the point is, it's math, you know?
Sure.
And I feel like that's very similar to something like Martin Luther King Jr. or Martin Luther King.
Sure.
Or Martin Luther King Jr.
Sure.
Right? Either one of those, where there's nothing to take away from what they did, but you also have to recognize the power of momentum.
Sure.
Right? And the physics that are in play and the pendulum that's happening. And if you catch that pendulum at the right time and you are properly prepared for that moment, you know, you could be the one that's the spokesperson for this swing back the other direction.
Sure.
And I think that's recognizing that and seeing that that's true is important for every believer in what we've talked about in purpose. You know,
sure.
That I might not be that one, but I need to be prepared for that opportunity. I need to be doing what I need to be doing on a daily basis, that I don't miss that opportunity if I'm called to it, or I recognize that maybe that I'm not that person, but my purpose is no different, is no less.
Sure.
You know,
I don't have to be that person, but yet I can be preparing in such a way that says, if I become that person, so be it.
Yeah. And I guess what I'm saying is I think those people do take special some things. I'm not taking away from them. So, you know, if you might be doing work right now that doesn't seem to have, but you have a special purpose and you're doing outlier work, right?
Sure.
You're doing something beyond what most of us do. There might be a reason for that as part of, you know, catching the next wave of history.
No doubt.
Which waves is another good analogy, you know.
Sure. They come.
Ebb and flow. And
yeah. No, I appreciate you sharing on that pendulum. And that ability. And so as I'm curious, okay, as I think about the pendulum, as I kind of think about the cancel culture, man, I have a tough time with that. Do you see that everything, and I use that word, you know, everything flows back and forth, or is there a general movement in some ways that over time the clock moves? You follow me?
Yeah, I do. Yep. So again, that kind of comes back for me to a theological question, which is, how long is eternity? Well, it's a pretty darn long time.
Sure.
So if you take that into perspective, I do think, it's all a pendulum. Like, in the whole story arc of the Bible is, I think you can see the pendulums there of, like, you know, it started out perfect. It swung towards evil. You know, God brought Jesus into the picture, started swinging back. And now you see that pendulum of end of the Bible and Revelation, and he's going to make it right and swing it back.
Sure.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. No, I hear you. And that's where I'm at. I think we can be aware of the micro pendulums, but I do believe, like you're saying, biblically, there is the macro where God definitely steps in and sets things correct. You know, it's like, it's, for lack of better terminology, it's like daylight savings time. Boom. Yeah. It happens this time, you know, and that's God's way of making it light again. You know, I just, poor analogy, apologize, but you know, it's not that the clock has moved. It's this process of God has basically said, okay, this is too far. And we can, like you're saying, with Noah, or, you know, with Jesus, you know, there was this time where there was appointed time and there was an appointed person. Yeah.
And you could see the pendulum literally stop at that person to go the other, you know what I mean?
Yeah. No, it's interesting to think about all the different people when you think about scripture, you know, how God used them in such a way to reset a moment, you know, in history, you know, that And it kind of brings back to, when you were talking about our hearts being evil and that kind of thing, you think about the Jobs and, and the Daniels that were given the opportunity, labeled righteous, in that process, or, man after God's own heart type thing. Not that they didn't have their errors, I was thinking more of David, but yet, it's interesting to see how God was able to move in people's lives. And even from a cancel culture perspective, being able to recognize, they had their own histories, and I think, even Paul talks about that, how the things that he had done, with zeal, he's like, I was clueless about that.
Yeah.
And if you thought you were this and I was that much more, that kind of thing. But yet, I was just still bringing it back to that aspect of he wasn't excluded by God. In other words, God doesn't cancel, us based on our past. If anything, he uses those skeletons.
That's right.
In such a way that has influence and helps other people in that process.
Yeah, I think you saying that definitely hits on this kind of deeper thought that I've had. Not deeper, but like kind of this underlying thought which I've had, which is anytime someone's skeletons are brought out, to me is an opportunity, like it's a good thing.
Sure, no doubt.
And this comes from, a perspective of change in my own life, and again, being involved in a recovery ministry. And anytime those skeletons are brought to light, that brings us the opportunity to then deal with them.
Sure.
Or, you can hire a bunch of lawyers to try and stuff it and hide it and, pay off the whatever.
Yeah.
Which certainly was a thing and is a thing that has happened. And so even if someone's skeletons are brought out and you feel like, but they're not that person anymore, again, it's an opportunity to address, to deal with, to admit, to, and I want to see my leaders who get canceled, right, because of their things, and they go, well, darn, I was hoping that would never get out, but here we are, and work through it. And that's the kind of leader I want to trust and respect with leading the things that I'm, my country, my state, my whatever, is the ones that can, because we all have skeletons. There's none of us that nobody has a clean closets, right? Like there's stuff you have that you would rather not the public know about.
Yeah.
So if you can have those things brought out and then work through them, like, to me, that speaks to your character and the integrity and the ability to, and helps to plead your cause in the sense of, I am different and I want to work through this. That sounds different than, just saying I'm different or like, being defensive or whatever. And a lot of that just, it's going to take time. If you're saying you're different, we're not going to believe you till we see it, kind of thing.
Sure.
And like I said, in some cases you can see there's no current evidence, and that's part of this whole struggle too. Is it's like it kind of puts a lot of doubt in a lot of places, good and bad, right? Where it's like, well, you say you don't do anything, and I don't really see anything, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's not happening behind closed doors, because that's the nature of these whole movements, is like, let's get this thing out of the dark. And but again, I very much feel like it's a pendulum to where we're like, all right, I got to stop believing every accusation, because they're not all true, or there's nuances to the story that don't come out when the first flames start flaring up. Right?
No doubt. Yeah. And I was thinking about it as far as, the whole aspect of guilty till proven innocent type thing. That's, that's an unfortunate consequence at times, because we can have people who, might have been, like you were saying, the innocent who are, a victim of circumstance. But at the same time, there is the aspect where, okay, we do have this awareness that we're growing in, but it doesn't have to be, it's not necessarily, well, a witch hunt is kind of what comes to mind, in that process. And I think at times that's what a, cancel culture can become, is this process of the witch hunt type thing. And I think what you describe in a healthy sense is a humility, to be able to recognize that, yes, I made a mistake at that point. I see it as a mistake, nothing I can do about it. It is a real skeleton, but I've also put these things in my life to be able to, keep that from happening again. Mm-hmm. And I think, it's helpful when, as you describe, when you recognize, okay, we all have those skeletons, because I think, that's kind of what Jesus did when, he had the woman caught in the affair before him. Mm-hmm. He just said, hey, yeah, this may or may not be, but there's some things about this that still seem pretty sketchy to me. Mm-hmm. It's like, we have this woman, where's the man? Mm-hmm. How come there isn't a man that's brought forward with this woman? Because, that kind of thing. And I like that dynamic of, being able to say, okay, yeah, I have my issues as well. And am I fully aware of them in this moment? And if I am, how am I going to look at that person differently because of that awareness?
So
go right ahead while the gears are spinning, pal. I see them.
That just gets to a bigger point, which is when we're hiding some things in our closet, a lot of times those are the things that we form our war parties around. Right?
Okay.
So if it comes out that this person was abusing someone and, or has this sexual sin, and I've seen it a lot with sexual sin, where until I've fully come to an admission that, I am messed up and I have a sexual addiction of some sort, up until that, we spend our whole life justifying and or protecting ourselves and or hiding and or like masking it. Sure. And one of the most common masks I've seen is like this indignancy towards the issue.
Sure.
Right. And I've seen, again, this is coming from a church perspective and seeing this from church leadership.
Sure.
Where it's like, you'll go to hell if you, whatever. Yeah. And kind of this like level of indignancy towards the issue. Sure. So I do think there is an aspect like what you were just saying. Mm-hmm. Can I come to grips with my own struggles and say that person's like me? Or am I nowhere near that ability to do that? And I only have the ability to, what's the word when you...
focus?
Indict.
Oh, okay.
I only have the ability to say that person's guilty. And like point outwards, and as long as I'm pointing outwards and got my finger guns up, right? Like no one's looking at me, right? And and they clearly see I'm on the side of righteousness because I'm pointing the fingers. Does that make sense? So I think that.
And I quite often I'll be honest, I'll see that in individuals who might have, like you're saying, that pet topic. That you can't do that thing. Yeah. If you do that thing, you are not a Christian.
Yep.
And I think at times that can be, part of what you describe in that process. It's like, I'm going to focus on that thing because that helps me minimize the things that I have going on inside of me, instead of being able to say, okay, this is what's going on with me, and I'm going to work on that. And you're welcome to join me because if you share that struggle, so be it.
Yeah. And that speaks to, ultimately we're about covering and hiding or justifying. I think that, again, going back to the flesh thing, that's part of it. And so sometimes it is about the very thing I struggle with, I pretend I am the most righteous about. Sometimes it's... what you're describing makes me think of someone who's been abused, who now says that is the worst thing ever, right? So you're on the receiving end of that. And like you said, rather than address the issues that I can't forgive, which that's a hairy issue. And I don't say that lightly, but rather than address my own struggles, I can only point outward at that thing. And that forever will be my center of focus.
Sure.
Right. And yeah, both of them cause us to not have the ability to, I don't know, have grace, I guess, right?
Sure.
Whether it's I'm struggling with that thing and I don't admit it, or that's the thing that hurt me. I don't have the ability to look at it with a proper grace perspective, a God perspective. And honestly, none of us do until he gives us that ability. That's why he sent the Holy Spirit, so that we can think about things above our own ability. Because we're being transformed by the renewing of our mind. You know what I mean? Because our natural bent is towards flesh and protecting myself and, defending and justifying. And Yeah.
So I think we made it all the way around to a certain degree. It's certainly, I appreciate the way, you brought it around to wrap up in that sense of being aware of the mistakes we make in the process, because I believe we've all done things that might be worthy of canceling, but being able to recognize that, okay, how am I excluding others? How am I, because I think we can look at a cultural dynamic and say, oh, that's the source. That, that sports team, that, educational system, whatever we want to. But, when we bring it back to the fact that, we're in this human experience, and yet God has still provided ways to be able to value people, and even the mistakes we make don't have to be hidden. And, they can be a great source of freedom to other people when we actually address that in a way that says, okay, you can cancel me if you want to, but this is still my experience, and I'm going to kind of continue to share that in such a way that offers other people freedom in that process.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
It does. Because getting caught doesn't have to be the end of the story, but so often it is.
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, I also appreciate how you brought it back around to the story about Jesus and bringing the Pharisees bringing the woman out to him. I think you're talking about the woman, the same story, but dragging her in front of him, saying, "Now what are you going to do? Are you going to condemn this lady?" And he said, "All right, here's the deal." After writing in the sand for a minute.
Exactly.
And this whole phrase of "He who
is without sin, cast the first stone."
Throw the stone first. Yeah. Go ahead.
Yep.
And I feel like that's so appropriate to this conversation. So often we don't have that challenging voice.
Yes.
To say, hey, what's your story?
Yeah.
Are you without sin? Is this, and I think, again, I don't want to take this whole cancel culture conversation and turn it into, well, we need to have grace for everyone.
I get you.
I think there is some truth to, and some justice that was happening and is happening as a result. And I think that's justice is also a character of God, right?
Sure.
But so is grace. And so I think we should desire both in the measures that the Holy Spirit desires, And so that's really where our prayers come in and say, God, I pray, pray that you'll have the right thing happen here, because this looks real bad. You know? And yet everyone deserves grace. So we put this in your hands, and kind of trust him with it. And that's why I think the pendulum is squarely in his hands. And I think the beautiful thing about God is he's put a lot of systems in place. And I think the pendulum is a systematic part of his creation, where he's not actively moving the pendulum with his hands. He created the beautiful architecture that allows that thing to self-correct over time.
Sure.
And he's in control of it all, but he also isn't like, I don't know. It depends on your perspective.
He's not anxious about it in that process.
He's not manipulating every little clockwork every second. He created this beautiful, amazing architecture that he can look back on and say, this is good.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And,
Yeah,
I don't know how I got to that, but
that's okay. I do. Yeah. I actually, what you were describing, I think so often I run into, is the individuals who have an affair type dynamic in the relationship. And, you know, I think in a lot of ways, the most hopeful thing that I can offer is this can make your relationship better than it ever was. You know, it doesn't mean that you have to cancel this relationship altogether. We just need to recognize, okay, some things need to change. Mm-hmm. And to be able to say, yeah, even despite this relationship can flourish in ways that it was never able to before. And part of that is going to be because there is this truth and this awareness now that we're actually willing to deal with.
Yep.
And so, yeah, that's kind of what came to mind as you were, you know, describing that process. So, yeah. Thanks for sharing, Justin.
Yeah, thanks for trying to say cancel culture.
Yeah, I can say it
for
now.
For the sake of
cancel culture.
Nice job.
Yeah,
Look at you.
I didn't even have to stop and think.
In one episode.
We talked about it long enough. Yeah, and sorry about that transition at the beginning, too. It got a little, nebulous out there, but yeah.
So I appreciate your efforts and your
transition. Sometimes it's better than others. That's the reality.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah. Yep. Sounds like the state of life.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's how we see it.
Hey, thank you for listening to our podcast. If you like How I See It, please do all the things that podcasts tell you to do. Subscribe, rate, review, follow us, and or talk nicely about us on social media. If you want to reach out, the email is us@howiseeit.click. Yep, I said .click, as in .click. Please tell your friends about this show, and we'll see you on the next one.